The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, and restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Those of y'all in the back of the parish hall, Jason, is it hard to hear me back there? Okay, great. Right behind you, there's a volume control knob for the speakers in the back of the parish hall that if it's hard to hear, feel free to adjust them. Welcome. If you were hoping to have an annual meeting at the end of January, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the snow and the ice prevented us from meeting. But I'm glad that we can meet today. How many of you have never been to an Episcopal Church annual meeting before? Yeah, look at that. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome. I think the principal purpose of an annual meeting is to gather us together, to remind us that we're all in this mission of the church together, and to conduct a very small bit of business, primarily to elect a new vestry class. But more important than that part of the process, though that is critical, is the work of making sure we're all on the same page. So I hope that by the time you leave today, you'll have a sense of what God is doing in and through the people of St. Paul's Church, and I hope you'll hear an invitation to be a part of that. I'm grateful to those who are able to join us online. Dan, thank you for running our stream. We are not watching the live stream to see what questions that you have. So if you're watching on the live stream and you have questions, please reach out to me or to any member of the vestry or staff as is appropriate, and let us know what that question is as the week or weeks unfold. The first matter of business before us is to officially elect members of the vestry. And at least one of you has said, wait a minute, didn't we do that back in December? Sort of. The annual meeting is when we elect the vestry, but the electronic ballot format that we did in December is how we decide who will be nominated for election at the vestry. And the parish has chosen 4 individuals who are on the back of the annual report. Let me pull them up on the screen. Give me just a minute. Yep, all right. So in that process, the parish has nominated A.K. Herod, David Jolliffe, Misha Melton, and Rolf Wilkin to serve a 3-year term on the vestry. Are there any other nominations for the vestry? Hearing none, is there a motion that nominations cease? Thank you. A motion and a second. That motion is not debatable. All those in favor of closing nominations, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. That motion carries. We will move to an immediate vote. And because there are 4 places and 4 nominees, it seems reasonable that we would vote by acclamation. All those in favor of electing those 4 individuals to serve on the vestry, please say aye. Anybody opposed to that motion, please say nay, and the 4 members are not allowed to speak. That motion carries. Thank you so much. Let me say a word about that, and then we'll continue on. Before the pandemic, we didn't use electronic ballots. We used paper ballots, and we also used a runoff format. So when I arrived here about 8 years ago, we would have the election on that Sunday, and then we'd have a runoff on the next Sunday, and then we'd have a runoff on the next Sunday, and sometimes a runoff on the Sunday after that. And that's why we start way back in December. Truthfully, now that we're using an electronic ballot with instant runoff, we could probably vote a lot closer to the annual meeting, but I do think it's helpful for the newly elected vestry members to be invited to start coming to vestry meetings and to begin to learn about that before their work officially starts at the end of today's meeting. But the vestry will certainly consider whether we need to adjust the election process. That's their decision. But I appreciate you electing those 4 members. Let me say one more word about our new vestry members. Karen Hodges, member of our parish and a member of the vestry, has resigned from the vestry because of some ongoing health challenges that she has. The vestry has acknowledged formally that vacancy has occurred, and they anticipate choosing Christine Cook to fill that vacancy for 1 year. Christine has served admirably and faithfully as the clerk of the vestry in this previous year. So we're going to invite her to be installed at the 11 o'clock service along with the other new vestry members, but the vestry won't officially elect her to that role until its first meeting in February, but she's already begun to take part in the life of the vestry in other ways. At the 11 o'clock service, if you're going to the 11 o'clock service, we'll invite the new and returning vestry members to affirm the canonically required statement, but also to receive our prayers and a pledge of our support. So I hope you'll join us at 11 o'clock. I'd like to call upon Jim Norris, Jim, to come and say a word or two of thanksgiving to those who are rolling off of our vestry. And then I'll come back with some more announcements about our annual meeting. I'm going to hand this microphone to you.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, everyone. I wonder if I could have our graduating vestry members who are here come join me up front. So Elizabeth and Julie, Hannah and Kristen. Hannah may not be here. So for those of you who have not yet served on vestry, I can tell you it's a truly rewarding experience. As you can imagine, there's a bit of a time commitment, but most would say this work is done out of love and care for this church. And I can tell you that these three ladies really care for this place. Over the past 3 years, here's a small list of their accomplishments. They've replaced every HVAC unit that we know of. They showed us how to recruit and mentor new vestry members. They've gracefully led us our stewardship over time, talents, and treasure of this parish. They led the cleanup of the great flood of 2025. They supported our learning and formation. They started the St. Thomas Guild. They planned all our parish picnics and retreats. They planted hundreds of flowers and led our capital campaign, and they literally kept the roof on. So as you can tell, our newest vestry class has big shoes to fill, and we're going to miss these ladies. So please join me in thanking them for all their service and hard work.
I join Jim and you all in saying a big thanks to this class. These 4 women have led admirably, and they have done amazing work these 3 years. And as you might be able to tell, the vestry gets to know each other pretty well. We learn to love each other and work hard together. And even though we're different and we represent different parts of our congregation, we very quickly realize that we're in this together. And those 4 women have really embodied that, and I'm grateful to them. Let me also say a word of gratitude to our continuing vestry members. If I call your name and you're here, would you stand for us? It's always good for the parish to be reminded who serves on the vestry. Serving this year as our senior warden is Jim Norris. Serving as our junior warden will be Justin Sneed, right there, thank you. Also serving, Mandy Kelly, Mac Mayfield, Eileen Kelly, Mary Ellen Hartford, and James Spallinger. Those are the returning vestry members. Let's say thank you to them for the work that they are doing. Also, a big thank you to Peter Elzer for serving as our parish treasurer, and to Christine Cook for serving nobly as our clerk. And we're grateful that Ryan Sheets has agreed to step into that role for the coming year. Thank you to you as well. I'm going to say a little bit more about St. Paul's Church and the state of our church, but this is a good chance for me to also tell you a little bit about Diocesan Convention If you are at diocesan convention, would you raise your hand? Some of us are here. Yep, several of us. Yep, thank you. Diocesan convention is kind of like the annual meeting for all of the Episcopalians in Arkansas, and we come together to do the business of the diocese. Most of the business of the diocese happens outside of convention, but there are certain decisions that we need to make, and your clergy and 4 delegates from our parish join some other observers, visitors, and volunteers from St. Paul's at Diocesan Convention. And I just want to say a couple of words about it. If you want to know more about convention, let me know or ask any of these individuals who was there. And if you were there, look for ways to share what you heard and what you appreciated about it. Here's what I heard and what I appreciated about it. The theme for this year is Grow in Grace. And I think our bishop is excellent at inviting us to return to what matters most as followers of Jesus. And I heard him say in his sermon on Friday night, in his address on Saturday morning, and then again in Saturday before we left, that if we follow Jesus, then we cannot not love our neighbors. And when we are called to love as God loves us, that will be costly, it will be sacrificial. And I heard our bishop remind us in wonderful ways that loving our neighbor will cost us friends. It'll cost us sometimes our job. It'll cost us our status. It sometimes even costs us our physical safety or our lives. But when we are loved the way that we are loved by God in Christ, and we accept the call to love others in that way, God's love becomes manifest in us and through us, even in our vulnerability, our weakness, our loss, and our sacrifice. And I appreciate the bishop's ability to help us stay focused in that. Another bit that I want to celebrate, our own Sarah Milford has been the convener, the chair, one of the chairs of a task force for justice and belonging. That's a work that the diocese, that's a committee that the diocese had said, would you do some work on issues of dismantling racism and making sure that everyone is included in the life of the church? And they have done that work really well and nobly. But they also recognize that this work is not temporary work. And so Sarah Milford and those on the task force proposed a resolution that we enshrine that work in the diocesan canons by creating a new diocesan commission for justice and belonging. That passed a convention, and so as of yesterday, the diocese is now committed to that work, not just as a passing thought, but as an ongoing part of our identity. And the work of dismantling racism is now woven into the fabric of who we are by being enshrined in the canons. And I want to say thank you to Sarah and all those who support that. Can we just applaud? If you have been a part of the work of the Task Force on Justice and Belonging, would you raise your hand? Because it's not just Sarah, it's others. Other members of our church, yep, thank you so much. Thank you. Again, if you have questions about convention, please let me know. All right, can I tell you about what I think is going on at St. Paul's? I think St. Paul's is in a great place. I am so glad to be your rector, and I sense that we are really glad to be a part of St. Paul's and what God is doing at St. Paul's. I love our church, and I'm delighted to be, can you believe it, in my 8th year as your rector. The pandemic kind of messed up our sense of time, of course, but actually, yeah, that's a significant amount of time. And I think it's enough time for us to really be entering not only our second chapter of our tenure as rector and parish, but also to kind of be in our stride in that second chapter. And I think some signs that we are in that sort of beautiful growing chapter of our life together are things like the addition of a new Sunday morning service, the launching of a capital campaign, caring for our properties and buildings, not only through our capital campaign, but through other devoted resources through our annual budget, and also through growth in our giving and participation in the life of our church. I think it is a wonderful privilege to be a part of the Episcopal Church here in Fayetteville. The annual report, I'm not going to read it. You will be glad to know. But the annual report, there are some in print. And also there's a tabletop tent that if you scan that QR code, it should take you to the annual report. So you will not only read from me, but from the leaders of many of the ministries of our church. But let me say a couple of things that have caught my eye. Over and over again, I meet people who come to St. Paul's because they love our music. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge how central to our identity music is, even if we prefer to worship at the 7:30 service or the Wednesday noon service where there isn't music. Music draws a lot of people into our life, and I'm really grateful for our music staff and our music volunteers for helping us experience the beauty of God and the beauty of music. Worship remains central to our identity, and it's not just our musicians and clergy, but we have a lot of ministries in the church that revolve around worship. Ushers, altar guild, bread guild, flower guild, acolytes and vergers. We have office volunteers who stuff the bulletins every week, as well as the staff who help out. So worship, of course, is at the heart of our life, and I'm really glad that we have grown in our participation in worship this year. As you'll read in the report, our average Sunday attendance, which is a principal measure of participation in the Episcopal Church, our average Sunday attendance went up to 403 on a Sunday from 393, so modest growth. I would have loved it to be more. And indeed, now that we've added the 9 o'clock service, our average Sunday attendance for the Sundays since we've added that, since the second week of August, is at 425. So we're up to 403 for the whole year. We're up to 425 now that we've added the 9 o'clock service. So again, we're growing. And it feels like we are growing in any way that we're able to offer something. I've said it probably 4 years in a row now that I still think our physical space is a limiting factor for us. And I think in order for this church to grow the way that Fayetteville is growing, Northwest Arkansas is growing, we're going to have to grow in our physical space. I am grateful that the 9 o'clock service has allowed us to stretch a little bit. But those of you who continue to worship at 8:45 and 11 have noticed that the church is still full. And it's going to be full until the church is bigger. We're not ready to do that now. We need to take care of some important things in this capital campaign. But I just want you to know long-term vision, this is a growing church. And we will grow as much as our space allows us to grow. And the staff and the vestry and I will continue to look for ways to enable growth, like adding a 9 o'clock service, without changing the way that our physical plant is until that time presents itself. But I'm delighted that we are growing in worship, but I also want to recognize that our physical plant is a limiting factor. As I mentioned a minute ago, the capital campaign is an important part of our growth, although if you've been to a small group gathering, you have heard that very little of the footprint of our space changes. And if you haven't been to a small group gathering in someone's home, I really hope you'll come to one either next Sunday after the 11 o'clock service, the following Sunday during the 10 o'clock hour, or on Wednesday night, the 4th of March at 6:30, so that you can hear in detail about the capital campaign, ask the questions that you have, help shape that campaign for success, and if you feel called, participate in that campaign. But I'll say in short form right now, our capital campaign focuses on 3 priorities: retiring the Bassett debt in order that those buildings might be used fully for ministry at St. Paul's, or at least the revenue from those buildings can be used fully for St. Paul's, to address some deferred maintenance issues like roofs that still need our attention, and also to make sure that our facility is accessible through some work on hardscape, parking lot, which also entails some drainage work, the front steps of the church. How can we get people in and out of the church safely while preserving those beautiful sycamore trees? That's going to take some careful work, and we've already begun some of that work because some of you have been generous enough to contribute to that capital campaign. Again, I hope you'll come to one of those small group gatherings and be a part of that. Let me say a little bit more about finances, and then I'll say a little bit more about the overall spiritual health of our church. In 2025, that's last year, giving to St. Paul's was up 3% over the previous year. Growth, which is always a good sign. It seems, though, that this capital campaign has reminded us that we love our church, because estimates of giving for 2026 are up 9%. And sometimes people think, oh, capital campaign, that'll have a negative impact on annual giving. It's the opposite. When we remember that we are taking care of this church and we're invested in the future, it means we're committed to sharing what God has given us even more fully in the current year. and our giving, our stewardship, our estimates of giving for 2026 are up 9%. That's a significant amount of growth that allows us to grow in our budget. Primarily, growth in our budget is a full year of Charles Martin, our new associate rector and the chaplain at St. Martin's. Charles joined us in August, which was already some growth in our budget, but Charles doesn't want to only be paid for 4 months of the year. He wants to be a 12-month employee of St. Paul's, 5 months of the year. He wants to be a 12-month employee. And so because of that, that required us to grow in our budget, and your generosity allowed us to grow accordingly, not only to grow in what he gives to St. Paul's, but also what he gives to St. Martin's. So I'm really grateful for that. It's also allowed us to grow in other ways in our budget. I'll have copies of the detailed budget. You can find it on our website. Actually, it hasn't been uploaded yet, but it'll be uploaded this week. I'm going to leave some copies on this table right here. So if you want to take a copy with you, you are welcome to see every line of our budget. And if you have any questions about how we spend our money, I'd be happy to tell you, as would any of the members of our vestry, Leslie Alexander or Peter Elzer, our treasurer. Let me say a little bit more about finances. One thing that I thought was curious this year is that even though giving, estimates of giving, were up 9%, 57 households who turned in a card in 2025 didn't turn one in for 2026. And a couple of those people have either died or moved away, but most of those 57 people are still here. You're probably in this room. And many of us forget that if we don't turn in a card, the vestry will not anticipate our giving. Even if you have given the same amount every month for 10 years, even if you have automatic giving set up through your bank or through our Tithely platform, if you don't give us a card, we don't assume anything about your gift. So remember the importance of turning in that card so that we can take your generosity into account. I have a feeling that by the end of the year, our generosity will be even greater than we anticipate, but we take you at your word. The vestry only counts what you put on cards in our pledge line for giving. So I suspect that 57 of those households just either forgot or didn't get around to it because otherwise giving has been up and remains up. Many people, I think at St. Paul, still live with under the myth that the St. Paul's endowment pays for most of our work at St. Paul's. We have a wonderful endowment, and it's really important to the long-term financial health of the church. Our endowment pays for less than 10% of what we do every year. Less than 10%. About 80% comes from your generosity every year. That's really important. I hope that you will remember St. Paul's through your will or through your 401k or 403b or through other end-of-life instruments or estate planning, because by endowing your pledge, you let us benefit from your generosity long after you are no longer able to make your pledge. But don't forget that our endowment right now only counts for about 10% of what we do every year financially. And so because of that, it's important for us to remember, my annual giving matters. We do not have a lot of money that we're kind of sitting on wondering how we're going to use it. The vestry is very careful to budget exactly what you tell us that you'll be able to give, and we build a ministry that reflects your generosity. Let me pause for, let me say a couple more things, then I'll pause for questions. I've already mentioned Charles Martin, a Charles edition. What a wonderful gift to us at St. Paul's. If you haven't had a chance to get to know Charles, I hope you will. Charles is a gifted priest, a gifted preacher, and is growing as actually a gifted administrator as well. I've invited Charles to take on leadership of all of our lifelong formation, and that's a really big responsibility, but it makes sense with St. Martin's being a part of that, and he's already flourishing in that way, and I'm grateful for his willingness to share his gifts with us, and I hope he'll be here for a long time. Sarah Milford also, as you all know well, a deeply gifted priest, wonderful preacher, wonderful pastor, has the heart of a pastor. Sarah, have you been with us 3 years now? Yep, 3 years, just in February, 3 years. What a wonderful thing that she was able to come and bring her gifts back to St. Paul's. Although she's already been doing it, I've invited Sarah to focus on parish life, which includes not only pastoral care, but also newcomers and all the things we do socially together, and also to continue to focus on outreach, justice, and community engagement. Those are two areas that she's focused on, as well as all the stuff that we share together. Another member of our staff who has come on board this year is Stella Greenhill. Stella is here today. Stella is back there, wave big so we can all see Stella. Yep. Stella did not probably come wanting that attention. She wants to be able to come to church and not come to work, which is sometimes a careful balance. But Stella is our office manager. She came into that role in August. Is that about right? August? And if you have ever called the church looking for a room for your group to meet, if you've ever called the church looking for access outside of office hours, if you've ever come to the church needing assistance, Stella, I bet, is the person who has helped you. She is wonderfully talented. She brings her gifts to us from a company here in town that, if they don't realize it yet, are going to be really sorry to discover that they lost her to us. But I think Stella's heart is for the compassionate work of the church. And she is sharing not only her heart with this place, but also her gift as an administrator and a manager of our volunteers and our whole front office. And I'm grateful to Stella for that. Other than that, our staff dynamic stayed pretty stable for the year. And I'm really glad to work with the best staff in the Episcopal Church. The last thing I want to say before I ask for your questions, I want to give just a little glimpse of something that I think is really important to our life at St. Paul's. In early October, a couple of parishioners reached out to me and said, we've noticed that about 5 or 6 people typically stay overnight around St. Paul's. They're not allowed to do that, but St. Paul's is a place that recognizes them and that they feel safe here. And if you come here at 2 o'clock in the morning, which occasionally when the burglar alarm goes off, the rector has to come here at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll see 6 or 7 people sort of sleeping in various spots around the property. And the parishioners who came to me said, I'm worried that when it gets cold that they won't have a place to go. The city of Fayetteville is willing to open some emergency shelters when the outdoor temperature drops at or below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. But what do we do when our neighbors, physically our neighbors, not just the abstract neighbors that we talk about when Jesus says love your neighbor, but actually physically our neighbors who live with us here, what will they do and what will we do when the temperature is too cold for anybody to be safe outside, but it's not 15 degrees yet? And they asked if it would be possible, maybe, just maybe, for us to figure out a way to offer overnight shelter for those who otherwise wouldn't have a place to go. And I said, I don't know. But let's figure it out. Let's figure it out. Let's talk to the properties committee of the vestry. Let's talk to our staff. Let's talk to our insurance company. Let's talk to the fire marshal. Let's talk to all of the people that we need to talk to figure out whether that's possible. And then let's start recruiting volunteers who would be willing to make that possible. And sure enough, within about a week and a half, 2 weeks, we opened a shelter that started that first night with 6 or 7 people. But word of mouth grows, and the need is not shrinking. And so I think one of the best things that we have done as a church is to open our doors to people who need a place to stay, because that is how we are accepting Jesus' call to love others as we are loved in a way that makes an actual practical physical difference. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Is it easy to find volunteers to stay overnight? No, it is not. We need more volunteers. Is it easy for the yoga group who has to come into this space when people are leaving on Friday morning? No, it is not. Is it easy on a Sunday morning when you're trying to get breakfast and the hall and this place are full of people who normally don't worship with us but are here because we've opened our doors? Is that easy? Absolutely not. It's hard. Our bathrooms are messier than they usually are, and we run out of toilet paper a lot faster. The demand on our kitchen is much greater. We sometimes run out of bacon. Grace is trying to increase and trying to anticipate that based on the temperature, but sometimes we miss the mark. But I'll tell you what, I am more proud of this church for what we've done by opening our doors than I have been in 8 years of being here. I get choked up. Yeah. And what I love about that is not only the importance that it is to the community that needs it, but because that's who we are. That's who y'all have been long before I arrived 8 years ago. This has long been a church that says we have resources to share. How are we going to share it? What are we going to do next? How is God calling us to be about the work of love and gospel and reconciliation and building up the reign of God in this place? And this church always says yes. When that opportunity presents itself, this church says yes, and y'all have again said yes. I am so proud of us. Not only has it made a difference to those of us who are here in this room, not only, of course, has it made a difference to people who spend the night here, it makes a difference in the wider community. Our relationships with groups like the Continuum of Care, City Council, Mayor Ron, who's a member of our church, as well as other groups and organizations, are growing. Those relationships are flourishing because they know that we're a church who doesn't just want to do something good, we're doing something good. And I think we should remember that we have the capacity to do a lot of good in this world. And with God's help, we'll continue to do it. So I want you to know how proud I am of us, and I hope you're proud of being a part of that church too. That's all I have. I'm going to say a little bit more about finances because Peter Elzer, our treasurer, isn't here. But let me pause for a minute. David McMath or Charles Martin, one of them has a microphone, and they're going to come around the room and invite anybody who would like to ask a question or make a comment to do so. Any questions or comments from my report? Any questions about the state of our church or about anything that you've heard so far?
Can we hear more from you or from Sarah about the commission that started, what that'll be doing moving forward?
I'll only say the task force for justice and belonging has existed for 4 years, a little more than 3 years since before you got here, right? Yeah. And they have a very clear mandate to do storytelling, to make sure that we're responding to wider church initiatives, to be about the work of welcoming, to structurally dismantle racism in all of those ways. And that work continues. The work doesn't really change all that much, except that now we have the potential to grow that work. It's a diocesan task force, which members of St. Paul's, now a commission, which members of St. Paul's are welcome to be a part of that. And I think you'll see the fruit of that. But yeah, I'm really excited about that. Yep, thank you. Other questions? Yep, Julie.
I don't have a question, I have a statement.
Yep.
I want to say thank you, Evan. You're a wonderful pastor for all of us, and we really appreciate the work that you do. It's not always easy with our group, but it is always meaningful. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I feel very valued and appreciated not only by our vestry, but by our parish, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. Yes?
Howdy, sir. I have a question. I love spreadsheets, but I'm just curious. Like, I'm not familiar with like church meetings like this where we talk about budgets. Could you just like explain to me what the difference is between the clergy budget is and the formation budget? Because like I don't know what like the formation budget entails, and I'm just curious because I'm just looking at it wondering what this means.
That's a great question, and I will try my best to answer that. Do you mind if I put a pin in that until we get to the treasurer's report? But thank you very much. That's a great, I'm glad you want to know about that, and I want to tell you about it. So hold on for just a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. Other questions for me about anything I've said or comments? Denise?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to remind folks that I think it is Friday evening at 6 o'clock, that several people from St. Paul's or from anywhere in the community can meet at Genesis Church at 6 o'clock. And it's a prayer service. It's not actually a prayer service, but it's an outdoor prayer gathering for peace and justice. I have to remember, Friday, several of us from St. Paul's gathered at St. James Church. And it's a wonderful opportunity to get together with the community. So this Friday will be at Genesis Church, and next Friday will be at St. Paul's. So I hope we get more people out this time. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that. Yeah. Other questions or comments for me at all? Yeah? Anything at all? Yeah, right behind you, Dave. Raise your hand, Tammy. Thank you. Dave didn't want to do that job, but he got stuck with it. I gave him the microphone. Thank you, Dave.
This is a question about something that was announced at the 8:45 service. There's a concert from some folks are coming down from Kansas City to sing this weekend, but it wasn't in the bulletin, and I'd like to know a little more about that.
I can't tell you much more, but the William Baker Singers are coming on Saturday at 6 o'clock to give a choir concert in the church. No charge. Yeah. They asked us if we would host them. There's a sign outside of the choir room. Yeah, just sort of, anyway, yes. 6 o'clock on Saturday. Come and join us. David, right? Yep, thank you.
In years past, St. Martin's was partially funded or supported by the diocese. And then I think it was transferred to us. Is that still the case?
It's still funded by the diocese, but it's a ministry that we're responsible for. So before 2025, St. Martin's was a ministry of the diocese that we tried to run on their behalf. Now it's a ministry of St. Paul's that the diocese supports financially. So I don't call the bishop to ask him what worship we should be doing in the chapel, in the same way that I don't call the bishop and say, what should the youth be studying on Wednesday nights, right? And so now St. Martin's is a ministry of church, our church, just like youth ministry, young adult ministry, children's ministry, yoga ministry. It's a ministry of the church. The building isn't ours. They still pay for the upkeep of the building. They provided $30,000 in 2025 for that, $40,000 in this coming year. But rather than keep separate books, rather than try to give them our financial reports, we're doing all of that internally, and we are grateful for their financial support.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Garrett in the back.
I think you did a great job telling us about what's happened over the last 8 years of your tenure, what's happened this year, and going into next year. I'm also interested to hear about how you're thinking about the next 8 years and priorities that you see are opportunities for our church.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation. I don't really have much of an answer except to do what we do more and faithfully and by God's grace. I think it's easier for me to respond incrementally than 8 years. You've heard me say that part of that is building related. We are constrained by our building. In the next 8 years, we will not have new church. The church will be 8 years from today. I feel pretty sure that church will still look the same, which means we've got to find ways for people to be a part of what's going on here. And the 9 o'clock service is one example. Evensong is an opportunity. Our commitment to Wednesday is also an opportunity. So I don't know. I think some of that will be staff growth. Our parish administrator, Leslie Alexander, is both HR manager, facilities manager, bookkeeper, customer service manager. And that's a lot more than someone who runs a $2 million, we need some dedicated bookkeeping work. We don't have that in the budget right now. But I imagine that by allowing for a dedicated bookkeeper to do that, that makes Leslie more available for the needs of the parish, including the staff. That also allows us to grow in some of those ways. I think we heard a little bit about this at Diocesan Convention, and I might write about it this week. I'm not sure. I haven't written the newsletter article yet. But we talked at our table of St. Paul's people that we're pretty good at being friendly when someone walks through the door. We're getting better at inviting people to walk through the door, but we're still not great at getting them connected. And I think if we had unlimited resources, I would love for someone's job to be every single newcomer who comes in the church, let me have coffee with them. Let me ask them what they're called to do. Let me get them connected with the leader of a ministry so that they can grow with us. That's how churches grow really fast. But we don't have I have coffee with people and I ask them how they're doing, but I don't have the capacity to do all of that too. So I think there's also an opportunity for staff growth there. I think within the next 4 years, maybe even less, the Bassett buildings will become either space for us to do something new that we aren't doing yet, or a generator of revenue that will allow us to have some of those staff positions or do something else new and exciting. I don't want to say what it could be, because if I say it out loud, that will concretize our dreaming in a way that's not fair. But some of you have dreams about what could happen in that space, who might be in that space, how we might use that space, or what we might do with $150,000 that right now we don't have access to, but we've got the asset to generate that. We just need to free it up by paying off debt. I think the sky's the limit in terms of what that would mean. So that's, at this point, probably the single greatest unused or underutilized space for us. So I think there's a lot of possibility there. I know that every member of staff dreams about growing. Like Jack wants to start a concert series this year. Our choir club, what a great sign of growth in our church is our choir club. What will be next in that regard, right? So Sarah, continuing to grow our commitment to outreach and justice through Common Good NWA. St. Martin's is growing fast, but what would it mean if it were even bigger? If St. Martin's demanded a full-time priest, not just half of Charles's time. So I think in all those ways we're likely to grow with our community, but I don't know more than that. Yeah. Claudia?
Yes. I have this question about the future. If ICE presence were to be stronger in Northwest Arkansas, Springdale will be a target. How do you envision us assisting our brothers and sisters in that area?
Yeah, thanks. Back in 2016, before the 2016 election, Springdale Public Schools approached us about being a day center, and perhaps a more than one day center, where the children, students of parents who might have been arrested in a mass ICE action in Northwest Arkansas, where students and teachers and other school administrators could come and help children get paired with whoever their legal guardian would be going forward. After the election in 2016, that critical need went away. It has come back, and so we're continuing to be in touch with Springdale Public Schools about whether they would need that. One of the reasons that that's become complicated is because the instructions that have been given to ICE are to no longer respect the long-held boundary that churches and schools represented. And so before this round of ICE raids, it was reasonable for us to believe that we could house someone safely without ICE coming through our doors to arrest them. That is no longer the case. And we do not want to offer sanctuary or housing for someone if we can't actually offer it. If it turned out that we needed to do that, we would probably do it very, very quietly and respond to that need on an individual or perhaps an individual family basis. But right now we don't have any plans to do that because as far as we are able to discern, we're not really able to offer as much as we would like to be able to offer. I think it's important to continue to be about the work of justice, to be about the work of reconciliation, to be about the work of standing with those whose voices are largely being unheard or ignored in our community. If there were lots of hearings, deportation hearings going on, I think it might be important for us to just show up as a silent witness so that people, residents, neighbors in our community who otherwise might disappear from our community without someone at least seeing them, looking in their eyes, recognizing that they're a part of our community and that we bear the loss of them if they were removed forcibly from our community. Maybe that would be something that we would encourage. But at this point, we don't have any specific plans other than to continue our partnership with Springdale Schools and any other school systems that would ask us to serve in that way. Other questions or comments? Let's look at the treasurer report, shall we? Peter Elzer sends his apologies. Peter was going to be here in January, but he's not able to be here today. He's our treasurer. And so because of that, I asked him to write some words. Normally his report is just numbers, but I asked him to write some words because I wanted you to hear, if you could, from him. Let me go to the end. To hear from him what he would say. I'm not going to read it to you. But you'll see on page 9, is that? Page 9, you'll see some of his words. Let me highlight a couple of things for you. It was kind of funny, but delightfully funny, that we have a $1.9 million budget, and we were off on budgeted revenues by $111, which I got to tell you, we couldn't do that well, again, if we tried. But we might not be $111 off. However, we're very consistently on target. Maybe not that on target, but we're really close to target. Budgets are just plans. They guide us in our ministry and our work. But the fact that we came that close, as Peter elaborates, speaks to your faithfulness and also to the careful use of your resources by our staff and other volunteers. So take a look at that. I think the one thing Peter would emphasize in his report is our commitment to financial transparency. If you have any questions about our finances, ask. Ask a member of the vestry, ask me, ask Peter, ask Leslie. The monthly financial reports are placed in folders right outside of Leslie's door. We put our entire budget on the website. We try to give you as many financial updates as we can without causing your eyes to glaze over. But we're committed to financial transparency. There is no detail that we will not disclose to you. If you have a question about anything, I hope you will bring it to any of us who are a part of our financial team. And I think that's largely what Peter says. Let me show you a little bit about our finances. This is on page 10 of your annual report. You can see it online or in print. You'll see that giving was above budget. Other income was below budget, largely because the tenants in the Bassett building left before their lease was up. And so as a result, we had to negotiate their departure. I want to say publicly a word of deep gratitude on behalf of St. Paul's Church to Will Clark, a member of our church, who also serves as our attorney when we need one, and he helped us navigate that beautifully. George Fawcett has helped us prepare to put those properties back on the market, but because of your generosity, overall, our total income was almost exactly what we expected. And you'll see that our expenses were slightly under by about $70,000. And even though we initially adopted a deficit budget, we didn't expect to end the year with a deficit, and indeed we didn't. And we ended up with a positive cash flow, which the vestry has used to support some local ministries, our overnight warming shelter, as well as attend to our capital campaign. That's 2025 operating numbers. You'll see the 2025 endowment. 2025 was a good year for most of us in the stock market, and the same was true for St. Paul's. We have 5 major endowment funds. The McMichael Endowment is unrestricted. The Greg Shively Endowment is for local outreach. The Reynolds Murphy Endowment is for historic properties and music. The Charlie Rigsby Endowment is for music. The India Eggleston Endowment is for youth scholarships, particularly to camp, but also for other youth ministries. And you'll see that over the year, they all grew in value, even though we took a disbursement. We do not regularly take disbursements from the Reynolds Murphy Endowment. There was a disbursement from the Charlie Rigsby Endowment. That's a typographical error. I don't have that number in front of me, but we did take 5% from the Charlie Rigsby Endowment to support music. Our endowment committee is a group of 5 people chosen by the vestry for 5-year terms, and they're responsible for managing our investments as well as determining what is a reasonable amount for us to take from our endowment for the use of each of those endowment funds. And I'm grateful to our endowment committee members for doing that. I'll draw your attention to our estimate of giving report. This is our stewardship report. And as I mentioned earlier, 57 households did not turn in a card who turned in a card earlier. And you'll see that that had a negative impact on our giving of $117,000. However, the number of people who turned in a card who did not in the previous year exceeded that, both in number and in amount. And also the number of you who increased your giving is also reflected there. So even though 57 households did not turn in a card who did the previous year, our overall giving through estimates of giving was up 9% by about $115,000. The last thing I'll say before I take questions, I can't answer quite as Peter Elzer would, but I'll try, is to tell you about our budget in 2026. Not a lot of big changes, except St. Martin's has grown significantly as we are responsible for more of that in this coming year. The same is also true for clergy, as Charles is here for the whole year. Let me say a word about what each of those categories does. Outreach is money that we use to support or do ministries beyond the church. That includes our 10.5% diocesan covenant, as well as money we spend for local outreach, work that we do, and also agencies that we support. Buildings and grounds is everything we spend on buildings and grounds, as you would expect. Administration is the cost of operations, the cost of a website, the cost of a copy machine, the cost of postage, but it's also our administrative staff, including Leslie Alexander, Stella Greenhill, and the part of Carol Nave's compensation that is communications. That's administrative. Clergy is everything clergy related, except for half of Charles, which is St. Martin. So Charles's personnel expenses are split in half. Half of them are clergy, half of them are St. Martin's. Even though St. Martin's is a ministry of the church and we could lump it into clergy, I want to be able to continue to demonstrate to the diocese what we are spending on college ministry. And as you'll see, we're responsible for over half. We're responsible for $42,000. They're responsible for $40,000, but pretty much we're halvesies on that. But I want to continue to show them what they are getting for their money. Worship is everything that happens in worship. It includes altar guild, candles, communion wine. It also includes music, our musicians, and the cost of music. Parish life is anything social. That's dinners, breakfasts, other social gatherings, pastoral care, and newcomers ministry. Formation is lifelong formation from birth to grave. Adult Forum, Sunday School, Tippy McMichael, yoga ministries fall into that. Spiritual formation for adults falls under that. So any formation that we do, lifelong formation. And St. Martin's, of course, is our ministry at the University Center. And you can see a sketch of our budget, but you can also see a full copy of the budget, which I'm going to leave up here for anybody who would like to see it. Any questions about finances for the 2026 year, 2025, or 2026? I wish Peter were here, and he wishes he were. Well, I don't know if he wishes he were here. I think he's on vacation. But I do know he regrets not being able to be here, though I'm not sure he would transport here if he could. Questions for me or questions that I can pass along to Peter? Joy.
Morning, everybody. Evan. I just have an affirmation to the vestry and to you, Evan. Coming out of Dallas, we were part of a larger church there and traditionally always had deficit at the end of the year, always. And some of us would add to our service by fulfilling that deficit. So I'm like, Evan, do you have a need to fulfill the deficit for St. Paul's? And you'll never guess what he said to me. We don't have deficit at St. Paul's. So good on you, vestry.
Thanks, Joy. I appreciate that. I love it when people come in from, good job, vestry. I love it when people come here from other churches or other dioceses and sort of shine a light on how other people do things, and I'm glad to know that we're on the right side of that example. I think you need to know that we believe that whatever you share with us will be enough for us to do what God is calling us to do. We invite you to share a sacrificial portion of your income, 10%. I ask you to give 10% to what God is doing in the world, both at St. Paul's and other places. That's a lot of money. If each of us gives 10%, whatever we share will be enough to do what God is calling us to do. If you don't give 10%, we're still going to do whatever we can do with what you give. Sometimes we'll adopt a deficit budget because we recognize that we need to use resources from other sources besides our annual giving. But for the most part, we're going to budget within our means. Long-term health for us, it's the way most of us work in our own private affairs and in our own private business ventures. But I think the theological statement is more important than the financial one. We believe in a God of abundance. God has given us enough. God will always give us enough. What enough is might not be as much as we dream, but I promise God will give us enough. And we will share enough to be faithful and to do good work in this place. So I love it when we get to celebrate God's abundance through our giving and through things like budgets and annual meetings. Any other, maybe time for one more comment? Question? Before they start church without me? Well, thank y'all. As you leave, I hope you sense God is doing great things in this church and you're a part of it. I hope you sense that your continued participation in what God is doing here is really important for us, and I hope for you as well. And I hope you know that if you have any questions about what's happening here, how we're using our resources, what God is up to, let me know. Let any of the leaders of our church know. We want to tell a good story about what God is doing in this place. If you'll stand, we'll close with a final prayer. Gracious and loving God, thank you for drawing us to you in St. Paul's Church, for all that you are doing in us and through us. Watch over us as we take care of the resources that have been entrusted to us. Be with our vestry, be with our staff, be with all the members of this church and all those who come to visit. May we together glorify your name and share your love with the world. And may your blessing, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, rest upon us and remain with us always. Amen. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.